Good morning, it's 10 a.m. here in Tianjin, China, and we're coming to you live from the United Nations Climate Conference. The OneClimate channel will be broadcasting at the same time each day in conjunction with our partners Tick Tick Tick. So if you tune in this week, we'll be covering some of the hottest topics of the global warming crisis. Yesterday we learned how China's leading the way to the new global green economy with a massive foreign investment and leading investment in renewable energies and wind power. Today I'm delighted to invite May Boeve of 350.org, the campaigning organisation, and Lina Li of the Chinese youth delegation. And we're going to be discussing the potential of people power a little bit. So it should be some interesting conversations coming up. I guess the first question for a lot of our viewers who are watching in the US, I guess, is why should anybody care about this issue at all? And May, perhaps I'll put this to you first. Why does this matter?
Well, I think this is an especially good time to be asking this question because this has been one of those years where we've seen climate impacts stronger than ever. And so many people are aware of this. There have been these incredible fires in Russia, the floods in Pakistan, and for the first time we're actually seeing some of the news reports reference climate change as a result of these impacts. So I think more and more people around the world are beginning to see this isn't a future threat, this is a present problem. So that's one reason that people can care. I think the other reason to me is that this is an issue that connects so many of the challenges that we face at this particular point in time. This is a crisis about development, it's about health, it's about human development and global cooperation. And so I think more and more people who have an increasingly global view of the world see climate change as an issue that really ties that all together and something that really, if countries can come together and solve this problem, we really can achieve incredible things.
Lina, do you agree? Why do you think people should care about climate change in China?
I agree, 100% what May has said. I think she made a really good statement just now, and I want to share more what I think why Chinese are caring about this or should be care about this. I think as everyone agree that the future of the world depends a lot on how China will look like in the future. And so will the Chinese youth matter in the future because we're going to be the ones who make the future China at that time. So to the global problem, without China, there wouldn't be a real solution. And that's the responsibility of the Chinese youth. And that's why we should join in this. And yes, we are new joiners in the global movement, but I can see that over the past few years, especially since last year in Copenhagen, where we sent the first session, youth have been really mobilized and inspired to join in and work together. I think this is a good start.
So Lina, you've just mentioned Copenhagen, which was this big climate conference at the end of last year, and there were a lot of hopes pinned on this in terms of solving the climate crisis. And there was massive mobilisation up for this conference as well. I know 350, your organisation, May, did a lot. Can you talk about the types of campaigns you've been running?
Sure. So in Copenhagen, there was an incredible outpouring from civil society, and it was the most massive march that's ever happened on climate change took place in Copenhagen. And moreover, there were events all throughout the whole world while that happened. We helped organize a series of candlelight vigils that took place in hundreds of places all around the world. And so there was really a strong sense from global civil society that this was the time to really act, and that makes the political failure of Copenhagen so much harder to see. But I think that what did happen as a result of all that activity was the people who got engaged in the run-up to Copenhagen didn't just turn off their TV on December 17th and say, okay, well, that was interesting, I'm going to go back to the rest of my life. That's a movement that's been growing. And so we've been working very closely to kind of come up with what are the campaigns for this year, for this particular political context. So that's why we're organizing the Global Work Party on October the 10th, because this is a concept that we think is right for this time. People are ready to work on the solutions to climate change because we know that our political leaders need more pressure. And this is a way to shame them into action and say, look, I am working as hard as I can in my city, but I can't write an international climate treaty. Only you can do that. And so we think that the Global Work Party, where there are going to be more than 7,000 events worldwide, as of today, I think in 183 countries, this is going to, again, send a very strong signal that the slow pace of these talks is happening out of step with what's really going on in the rest of the world, with how concerned people are and how active people are seeking a solution.
I guess the obvious question is 7,000 events, really impressive, and 5,000 activities, I think, and actions before Copenhagen. Why isn't this having the impact that we want? And how are we confident that all of the kind of the outpouring of emotion and all the calling for real action here is going to make an impact?
I think it's already making an impact. I think that what we need to continue to demonstrate is this isn't just not just a show. These aren't just political rallies where people are yelling. These are lasting actions that people are taking. So these are events on one day, but every event represents something that you have to go back to on October 11th and October the 12th. And so that's one element of it. But it's true that our movement needs to put on more pressure. Right now, there are not a lot of political leaders who feel that their decisions on climate change will make them lose an election. And in the past 10 years, everyone thought, well, if we just demonstrate how bad the problem is, they will act. And now we just need to, the piece of information that politicians really care about is whether this will make them lose an election. And so that's where we need to go as a movement. And this is one step. The Global Work Party is one way to grow the movement and really keep people engaged for the long haul, because this is a long fight, but we need to take it to the next direction and make it more about political pressure. That's harder in some parts of the world, I realize.
Lina, I want to come to you on this on the subject, because May's talking about increasing political pressure, and the types of actions we've seen in the past include big protests, and in Copenhagen at this big United Nations Climate Conference, I think there were 150,000 people marching in protest. That's not the kind of activities we're seeing in China. What potential is there for people power in China?
Yes, you are correct. We take different ways because of I think it's of our culture and also our political environment. We don't. I had a bit of a comparison when I was in Copenhagen, and I figured out that we do things from really different. We don't call it campaign even, because we take it from a social perspective rather than political perspective. Our target is not only or not directly to pressure the government to tell them what's the right that they should do. And we normally focus on motivate our peers and the other stakeholders in the society by the use in a very positive way. For example, we demonstrate our initiatives from the universities. They form groups and they try to do some recycling, and they do some energy reduction projects and so on. So I think this is the different. And the other different thing is actually in China, this is what I shared the other day with another friend from Kent. In China, there has been the combination of bottom up and top down. Actually, the Chinese government, the central government, has put enormous emphasis on developing low carbon economy and so on. And we want to encourage them, and we want to be part of it. We want to see how they can make this and how we can contribute. So I think in this way, it's easier for the government to work and to accept what we demand. And I think in this way, Chinese youth can make more impact in society and with our government.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why I think global movement building on climate is so interesting, because in Beijing, for example, on 10-10-10, there's going to be an event, a race to collect as much trash as possible and then make this beautiful art sculpture with it. And then I was just speaking to someone in the U.S. who wants to do a political canvas about a particular candidate. And that's why I think the potential for all the work that's happening globally is so interesting, because it's true, we can't run the same types of initiatives all over the world, and nor should we. But that's where I think our work at 350.org has been most interesting to me, is we learn all the different ways that we're going to solve this problem, and it's going to be about exactly the bottom up and people in their own countries determining what is the most right action for them.
And I actually wanted to ask you about that because 350 gained kind of international coverage. Front page of the New York Times said it was an unprecedented global event. You know, thousands and thousands of people around the world all taking action on the same issue. But is that the right point to put the pressure? You know, it's a global problem, of course, and it needs a global solution. But most politicians are concerned about the national issues or maybe even local issues. Is there kind of a certain kind of point where we can apply pressure that's actually going to make more of a difference, or does it need different solutions in different countries? What do you feel?
I mean, I think we absolutely need to do both, because we are dealing with a global problem, and the world is only going to become more global as each year goes by. And so it's true that domestic campaigning is what I think will really change particular politicians on this issue. But you know, in 2015, who can predict what the next global trend is going to be? But the only bet I'm willing to make is that we're going to be even more connected around the world. One example I like to think about is when we first started 350, there was no Twitter, you know, and now that's a huge part of the work that people are doing to kind of share around the world. So we can't know what's going to come ahead of us, but we have to continue to think, how can we be more global? How can we better connect? Because, especially for our generation, we grew up at a time when we're Skyping with people from China in the morning, and then in the afternoon we're talking to someone in New Zealand. I mean, our identity is very global. And so that's, I think, why young people are leading the climate movement, is because we already think in this way. But we need to continue to connect that back to individual countries. Who needs to move? The U.S. continues to be the laggard here, so we need to think of the U.S., how do we change that reality while still connecting it back to the global movement?
Lina, perhaps I can just pick up on May's comment about the importance of social media, because as many of us have discovered arriving in China, websites such as Twitter, YouTube, Facebook are blocked here and difficult to access. That's okay. But yeah, they're difficult to access. So what do the Chinese youth campaigners using online campaigning, or do they use different websites, or is that a smaller part of your actions?
I think we are trying to use some websites as well, but normally we use mini blogs, and websites besides Facebook and Twitter. And what I want to build on May's comment is that I truly believe in the connections among the world, and I truly believe that what Copenhagen has taught me is that despite all the differences, that we can openly talk to each other. Every country has different situation, but youth and all the people around the world share the future, and that's why they work together in their own way and collectively with each other. So building on this, both tracks, we can build a really beautiful future together. And I think, as we said in the intervention yesterday, our actions has taken lead, and the politicians will follow up.